Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Horn Call Podcast. My name is James Bolden. I am the publications editor for the International Horn Society and your host. Picking up where we left off with last month's episode of the podcast, we're going to continue with some more historical audio from a past horn symposium. This is the very first IHS workshop, as it was called, in 1969 at Florida State University. This is a panel discussion with Philip Farkas, Barry Tuckwell, James Chambers, Anton Horner, Wendell Hoss, and Max Pottag. The panel is presumably moderated by James Chambers. They took written questions and questions from the floor. Some of the things they talk about include schools of playing, solo playing developments, transposition, intonation, difficult openings, and playing in band. So it's really quite a window into the history of the IHS. And I thought it was fitting with the next IHS symposium coming up very soon in Montreal, Canada, that it might be fun to listen back to some footage or some audio from the very first IHS workshop.
Fred Young from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania asks the following question. Several times during this meeting, the artists have said the path to being a great French horn artist must be traveled under the guidance of a great artist teacher. Would the panel please list the principal horn players and teachers? In addition, it would be very interesting to construct a family tree of horn players. This tree should extend back as far as Mr. Horner and Mr. Pottag can remember to their youth. Let's take the second question first, because I know that Mr. Pottag and Mr. Horner both, I believe your teacher was Gumpert. Can you help Mr. Bird in this question? And both of you.
Yes.
The family tree.
Yes.
Can you hear?
Mr. Horner, your teacher of the horn was Mr. Frederick Gumpert. Right. Frederick Gumpert was the solo horn player of the Gewandhaus opera in Leipzig, Germany. And Mr. Horner studied with the solo horn, the Gumpert was a very, very great artist, great man, and Mr. Horner studied with Mr. Gumpert. That was the beginning of the style of horn playing that we have today. Mr. Horner studied with Mr. Gumpert, and of course Mr. Horner brought all of this in. I was one of his students, just like Mr. Chambers and others have followed, and we go down the line. That's the way this is the schooling that we have. Now, many of you have been in our class, and with Mr. Horner, and you'll notice how you take your hand and change it and so forth. This is the way he was taught, and that's how he teaches this. And you've got it now. That's the way it's going to go.
When Mr. Horner left, I was accepted as another student of Mr. Gumpert. And the way he started teaching, I had to play the hand horn, first of all, in case if a valve shouldn't function, that you could help yourself with your hand. You remember that, Tony? And as was my good fortune, Mr. Gumpert was retired. The Gewandhaus Orchestra had 6 players and 4 played in the opera. At one time, we students were so enthusiastic, we gave a concert for the faculty of the Royal Conservatory, a one-act opera, a symphony, and a horn group. My life's work and ambition. I had a double quartet, and Mr. Gumpert came to me after the concert. He says, Pottag, he says, we are going to have a quartet. I'll play first, the 2 extra men from the opera play second and fourth, and you play third. And I had a most delightful time and enjoyment in French horn playing. That's where my quartet started for and today I think they have 190.
Who was Mr. Gumpert's teacher? Do you know?
That I don't know.
Who was Mr. Gumpert's
Horner,
teacher?
would you know who's Mr. Gumpert's teacher? Who did Mr. Gumpert study with? Would you know?
Do you know?
I don't know that
Any
either.
idea?
Yes.
No. Well, I suppose he developed as a great teacher and a great player. Through that, he wrote some several books and taught the proper way, and a straight tone, like we expect when you play Rienzi and hold that note.
Yeah.
And
This is a question directed to Mr. Farkas and Mr. Tuckwell from Kenneth London from Hyattsville, Maryland. Could you please discuss and compare the position of the horn as a solo instrument today in the United States and England? And do you expect any increase in the appearance of the solo horn in this country in the near future?
Mr. Tuckwell, would you like to take it?
Well, I'm obviously not in a position to speak about big developments that I hope there are in the United States. In England, I walked into a tradition that was already there. This had been created not only by Dennis Brain, but by his father, Aubrey Brain, who was a very great player, really great player and teacher. He played on the funny little small bore French horn, but he played on it with the F crook, except when he played the Brahms trio, when he played on the E flat crook, which is a salutary lesson to us all if you listen to the recording he made. So there's more acceptance by the general public of wind instruments as solo instruments. This is not only because of Aubrey Brain, but other leading players from England. I'm thinking particularly of Leon Goose, who was the oboe player, and Reginald Kell, the clarinet player. They were very sort of spectacular players who created interest in wind instruments as solo instruments. So there is a big sort of acceptance by the public of wind instruments playing solos. There's been, in the last few years, a big development in the recordings made of wind instruments as solo instruments, and this, of course, is immensely interesting. I mentioned the other day, if one looks at the recording catalogue of even 10 years ago and compares it with the recording catalogue of today, I haven't actually worked this out, but I'm sure we would find that the difference is about tenfold in the number of solo horn records that are available today.
Yes, well, I think...
Mr. Elliott from Murray State University asks, we as horn players enjoy the challenge and mental exercise that is required by transposition. Are there any reasons other than tradition for continued use of untransposed parts? Is the variance of tone color associated with the various crooks of the hand horn still significant in today's horn playing? Let me repeat the last question. Is the variance of tonal color associated with the various crooks of the hand horn still significant in today's playing?
Well, I won't try to answer the last part of that at the moment, but I just want to touch on something that Mr. Tuckwell mentioned this morning. I think the most disconcerting thing that can happen to a player, particularly if he's had some years of experience, is to find these new edited parts of an orchestra piece on the music stand. I remember the last experience, for 30 years I've been playing Brahms' Second Symphony. First movement is horn in D. Perfectly nice and easy to play. D is not a difficult transposition, and you get rid of all those accidentals in the music. It's a nice, clean-looking page. Then recently we played it out at Aspen, where they had one of the new-fangled editions. So many so many cues that I couldn't see the notes for the cues. But the thing that disconcerted me on that was that it had been retransposed back to horn in F, or I should say to horn in F. And it was fine, except that all those years of playing it, I was worried. In fact, one time it caught up with me that I assumed I was transposing to horn in D, and I would get a 20-30 measure rest and come back, I see a C and A, and I'd automatically play the F sharp below it, which didn't help the Brahms symphony at all. But it was simply that my mind clicked into sort of automatic pilot and horn and D, and that symphony I associated with horn and D, and the 20-bar rest was enough to let my mind slip, and I came back in the wrong transposition. And I hate it, and I think that tradition should go on. Of course, Brahms originally meant it to be horn and D, which is a much mellower sounding horn than we have. But since when we play our valved horns in D horn, we find that a great many of the notes are involved with the first and second valve anyhow, which would automatically put it into a D horn. I don't know if that means anything, but I suppose the new, younger people would get a hold of a horn and F part and enjoy it because it takes less mental work. But once you establish that mental work and put it away in the back of your mind, it's very hard to switch to the F horn when you're used to D horn in that particular movement.
Any other?
I agree very much with you.
I think the thought behind the question is the concern for the preservation of tone color, and perhaps the alarm at the present tendency to go in for shorter and shorter instruments, which have been mentioned in the past few days, F alto, even piccolo B flat. And I agree, I'd be very idealistic and play on as long a tube as we can manage with accuracy, because this does produce a richer sound. This is not only fancy, it is an acoustical fact that there are more overtones to be heard. But we have to reconcile that with keeping a job. But it mustn't be just a form of escape, just as note-getting, rather than practice. The players in Vienna still play on long F horn. In fact, they play most of the repertoire on the F horn. I know that Roland Berger has an F alto, which he doesn't admit to, which I've seen him play the Beethoven 7th Symphony on. But he does as much as possible try and play on the F horn, because he considers the particular sound they make there, the traditional Viennese sound, is worth preserving. I think he's right, even if we don't like it, because it's a pity if we all end up making the same sort of noise.
May I say one word, please? I feel as a symphony player through such long experience, if I play a Brahms symphony, naturally I produce a little fuller, richer tone than I do by playing a Mozart symphony. That I have the feeling of to associate with the composition. Mozart is light and light tone quality, while Brahms is a richest tone quality possible. Am I right?
There was another question similar to the one just asked, so I will pass over it. It had to do with transposition, use of key signatures. Mr. Tuckwell, this is addressed to you and to the other gentlemen as well. The writer is David Gucker from York, Pennsylvania. There is, particularly in the choral area, a school which contends that intervals of a major third, and hence the third, sixth degrees of any scale, are being sung and played flat. The results of singing and playing these notes sharper seems to have had the result of adding a dynamic quality to the music presented. Do you have any comment or criticism?
It's addressed to me. I'm trying to give the first answer. I think what is being referred to is trying to sing and or play with an untempered intonation. In other words, not to follow blindly the intonation we hear on a piano, which is basically out of tune, because there are more than 12 tones that we should be able to play. If you tune a piano in tune for one key, you'll find it's terribly out of tune for another key. That's why they've had to adjust the difference between, say, say, F sharp and G flat. They should be different notes, of course. I think this is what the question means. This is why playing with the piano is so difficult, because we're unconsciously we will play in tune for that key, but the piano doesn't adjust.
So you have to adjust to
You have to adjust to the piano.
If I can mention Mr. Zell again, when one played Oberon with him, the three notes, of course being part of a D major scale, he wanted the F sharp, the third note of the scale and the third note of the call, to be quite sharp. He was not happy if it was what I would have called in tune. He said, I don't want it to sound like you're playing D minor in a sharp manner. I want it to sound like D major in a definite manner, and of course the way to do that is to get the third sharp, not flat, certainly. And I think an interesting sidelight to this is that we, on our valve instruments, of course, are necessarily playing a tempered instrument. That is, the manufacturer might think it's a tempered instrument. We play a G sharp, we ordinarily use second and third valve. I'm talking G sharp rhythm on the F horn. And we play A flat also second and third. We may untemper it with our lips. Thank goodness the horn is so flexible that we can do this, so that I would say the horn has the same ability to play an untempered scale as the human voice has to sing one. What I do think is interesting is that we don't think of this point nowadays, but when we look back at a hand chart of how the hand horn was played, you can take Gallet's method book and look at it. He was very careful to make the distinction between a G sharp and its enharmonic change into an A flat. All through the entire 3-octave range which he writes for, he has a different hand position. Might be slight, but different for an F sharp or a G flat, and all through the entire scale. I wonder if the player was actually able to make these slight distinctions, but the chart certainly was aware of them. I can't call it a fingering chart because, of course, it was a chart for the hand, but they were careful enough in those days of the hand horn to distinguish between the enharmonic changes. It seems to me we should distinguish between them, even though we might be using the same fingers for the enharmonic differences. We can make that adjustment, I think, with the lips as well as with the hand slightly. Although we talk about changing the pitch with the hand, I feel this is the last resort. First, you tune the instrument to the best of your ability, then you play it in tune to the best of your embouchure's ability, and what remains to be tuned should then be used by the hand, but certainly the least amount possible.
Kip, any comments you want to make? No? Well, gentlemen, here's a question for each of you. What in your orchestral experience has been the 3 most difficult passages for you to execute? And perhaps discuss why these were difficult for you, or any interesting stories connected with these passages. Mr. Hoss, may I begin with you?
My mind's a blank.
Well, who wants to start? The 3 most difficult passages in literature.
They're all difficult.
The next 3.
That's very good. The next one. Well, I can name one I think that's difficult for only psychological reasons. Again, Oberon. It's obviously a beginner's stuff, but it's the situation. Oberon's never played anywhere but the beginning of the program, unless it might be an encore. The beginning of the program, the house lights dim, there's a hush in the audience, the conductor comes out, there's a moment of applause, during which, if you're smart, you're touching a D concert on the horn. Then there's this quiet, and suddenly you think, oh, I'm starting the entire program, and I'd better do it softly. It's slow enough so they can hear your tone, your intonation, your nervousness. Everything shows in Oberon. It shouldn't be difficult, and it's ridiculous that it is difficult, but it is difficult. That would be number one.
Would it be a place to tell a little joke about
Yes.
my first position in Europe? The first horn player of that orchestra was discharged because of carelessness and indulgence in liquor. So he was discharged and played his last concert. To get even with his conductor and manager, they started the program with Oberon. And the conductor came in, house full of prominent people applauding. He gets on his podium, taps, and gives the cue to the horn player. He sat there, not a sound. Not a sound, and he puts his horn down again. He taps again, the horn player ready to play, not a sound. So the conductor was so embarrassed, he steps down from the podium. The moment he steps up, whoa. Have a little fun.
Mr. Burr.
While we're on the subject of Oberon, perhaps I have a couple of things to say about these three little notes. Mr. Farkas said it's usually played, usually the first number on the program. It's true. Always the first number of the program. And I tell you, it's hair-raising. We're going to sit there and go with that first little note. It has to be pianissimo, no crescendo, nothing. Just like the wind, You have to hold that F sharp, hold it, don't let the conductor hold it. Well, I remember with Stokowski, in the beginning when I first started, when I first came back, he was quiet on the stage, everything just normal, he was quiet, and then he comes down with the beat, play it, fine. Then after a few years, he got in the habit of running in for the concert, he'd jump up on the podium, of course, people start to applaud, and before the applause was completely died down, he gives a beat, and I said, thank God, the first note I don't have to worry about. That went on with Tuckwell. Now, with Toscanini, it was entirely different story. We would play countless times with Toscanini. It was always the first number of the program. This one time, he programmed Oberon, the very last number on the program. And we played a Schumann symphony, I believe, and I think we had La Mer on the program. And then afterwards, we played Don Juan of Strauss, and the last number was Oberon. So you can just imagine what was in my mind during the whole program, wondering how am I going to get that finesse, that beautiful sound, that attack. Well, I have to tell you, it really was marvelous, because I didn't realize, for the first time in my life, I thought to myself, this is going to be some experience. Sure enough, it was marvelous, because this was just as fresh. It was just wonderful. I was all warmed up. Everything went beautifully. Now, I just want to say one more thing about not only the Oberon, but any kind of an interest that a horn player has to get, or any wind player, for example. Toscanini was probably the greatest conductor for opera, as you know. He's a great opera man. Therefore, when he would give me the beat to play Oberon, it was like this. He breathed with me, you see. He didn't go like this, or like that, like many conductors. He would go, and I felt it. I go, the timing, the timing. The timing was just magnificent. And the tempo had to be just exactly right. And he did not conduct it in eighths, it was in 4. Then after the second time, then, of course, he went in eighths because the strings are with you. I just want you to know how the beat means an awful lot for any wind player. You must play with it. And I think that comes from being an opera singer. You know how to play.
Have any other comments?
Well, I can mention one other number. It's not difficult, but it has a difficult situation surrounding it. This is the beginning of the Brahms B-flat concerto. The notes are beautifully placed. It's the best range of the horn. The only thing is that the piano comes up on the stage from the cold basement, perhaps, the concerto is never the first number on the program. The orchestra's warmed up, and you know what happens to a warmed-up orchestra. It goes up in pitch. So then the piano comes on the stage, not the least bit affected by the fact we're warmed up. Then the concertmaster goes over and hits an A of all the useless notes to be heard before the Brahms B-flat piano. A is it. Then there's another cooling off period until the soloist comes out. And then you play these very simple, easy opening notes of the Brahms B-flat concerto, and you wait with bated breath. You have a bar rest to see whether you were in tune or not. You won't know till the pianist comes in. But this is an interesting moment in your life.
We have a few moments remaining for questions directed from the floor, so we'll be able to recognize a few questions. Who has one? Yes, sir.
How long have Mr. Pottag and Mr. Horner known each other, and did they ever play together?
How long have Mr. Pottag and Mr. Horner known each other, and did they ever play together? Mr. Burr?
Mr. Horner, how long have you known Mr. Pottag, and have you played with Mr. Pottag?
In
1901, but we never played together. We interchanged position, I with his brother. Mr. Horner was with Victor Herbert in Pittsburgh, and when we reorganized the Philadelphia Orchestra, we only had 3 horns. So when Mr. Horner came back to Philadelphia, his home, he wanted to bring his brother along, and naturally I interchanged my position. I went with Victor Herbert, but we never had the pleasure playing together. But I admire Mr. Horner as a person and as a great, great, great horn player.
Some of you may not know that Mr. Horner's brother, Joe, played horn with the Philadelphia Orchestra. He played second horn. Another question. Yes, sir? Yes, ma'am? I don't know that any of them have had such an experience to base contrast on. Would you? Some larger bands are called wind ensembles and bands. Do you want to comment, Mr. Hines?
Oh. Well, I would certainly think it's an entirely different approach, because in most bands, now the bands have certainly refined. Out at USC, we have William Schaefer as the director, and he makes these symphonic arrangements, turns them out one a week, magnificent things in which he takes Berlioz's fantastic symphony and does a movement of it for the band and makes a very presentable thing of it. Well, in the case of that kind, I think you have to play at least as you would orchestrally, which again, of course, is on a little different approach from what you probably mean by a chamber music ensemble. But that has been answered before about the difference between orchestral playing and woodwind quintet, for instance. But just the ordinary, well, the traditional school band would call for a little bit more positive, more less shaded style of playing than you have to have in small ensembles. Is that what you meant?
I think so.
Okay.
Yes, sir.